Hello everybody and welcome to How Do I Homeschool? My name is Rebecca Devitt. I'm the author of Why on Earth Homeschool, and today we're going to talk about some benefits of homeschooling. One of the top benefits of homeschooling is that it can suit a child wherever they're at academically. This means if you're gifted, you can choose a more challenging curriculum, perhaps a classical education curriculum, which will really stretch your mind and give your mind a lot of things to munch on. If perhaps you're disabled or you have other special needs, you can go a little bit slower. You can get to medical appointments if your child is sick and work on days that it does suit you. A child can also study at their own pace, which is an amazing benefit of homeschooling. Another benefit of homeschooling is the parents can choose the curriculum. So if you go to a public school or another type of school, your curriculum is completely chosen for you. It doesn't get to consider your child much, and you just basically your child has to study what all the other children in their year is studying. As a homeschooling parent, one of the benefits of homeschooling is that you can choose the curriculum that you like best or that will suit your child best. A lot of parents want to give their children perhaps a more rigorous education in the classics, so classical Christian homeschooling. So I've got a whole video series on what classical Christian homeschooling is, which you can look up. But it's quite a rigorous curriculum. Another great homeschooling method I love is the Charlotte Mason homeschooling method, and I do love this. She was actually a classical homeschooler she was a homeschooler herself, but she was a classical educator. A lot of the things I love about her curriculum is that she gets children into nature and she gets them being handy, and she works on their character. And she was a Christian educator as well. So if you study classical Christian education and you study Charlotte Mason education, it's a really great, they're really great homeschooling methods. Other people like the Montessori approach, unschooling, which is particularly popular in, less so in America, but more so in Australia. There's also Waldorf homeschooling. Just trying to think of other types, but I've got a video on different ways you can homeschool, so make sure you check that out. There's lots of different ways, but yeah, you can choose your curriculum if you homeschool. Some children might be being bullied at school, or they could be having other problems with the environment, perhaps lots of peer pressure. You can get them out of that environment and you can meet their needs. If they are emotionally really struggling, you can take them into a homeschooling environment and give them the care that they might just not be getting from school. Not necessarily because the teachers are bad. It's a really good point to make. Not necessarily because of that, but often because it's low teacher-student ratios, and the teachers just don't have enough time. Sure, some of the time teachers are uncaring, but a lot of the teachers I know actually care, but they just don't get time to get around to their students, and some would love to have that time to be able to do that, but they don't get that. In a homeschooling environment, one of the benefits is that you can meet your children's needs. As a Christian, I feel the homeschooling environment is a great way to pass on your beliefs. In a slow and considered way, you can have really close conversations with your children and really see what they're thinking and answer their questions closely. And I think it, certainly for me, I was homeschooled, it did a great job of passing on those Christian values, whereas when I was at school, and this is my experience, definitely not everybody's experience, but I found my Christian school, it was a good Christian school. It didn't do a great job of passing on those values, that faith and the gospel for me to understand, whereas I found my parents did a much better job of that, possibly because of them just having more time to do that. One of the best benefits of homeschooling is that you can do your work in a 2 to 3 hour period as opposed to taking all day. So school children have to get in the car early in the morning and then they come back in the afternoon. They're often exhausted because they've been there all day. In a homeschooling situation, you can perhaps get up a little bit later, which is really valuable for teenagers considering the way their hormones work. they go to bed later and they really should be getting up a little bit later, but sometimes with travel and early school times they just don't get the sleep they need, which decreases their test performance. In a homeschooling situation, they can maybe sleep in that little bit more and work perhaps later than some school children might be able to, but really they can get their job done in a fraction of the time that school children are able to do theirs in. A lot of the reason this is a benefit of homeschooling is that you can just cut out that busy work, that fluff, that moving from classroom to classroom, that wasted time as you wait for people to finish while perhaps you finished, or you wait for the teacher to restore law and order in the classroom. So there's just not that waiting. And you can, with the time you save, you can look at an entrepreneurial venture and start that early instead of going to college or doing a trade, for instance. You can use it to do hobbies, learn an extra language, do chores around the house, or just spend it in, many homeschoolers do so much leisure reading or reading for educational purposes, and that's probably the reason why out of all of the subjects, homeschoolers do particularly well on reading because they just read and read and read. We have my pastors have 3 children, and he brings them to church, and we see them at the 6 p.m. service, and the children always have books in their hands, and that's really lovely to see them learning and keen to learn. In a school, your child is often being tested to see where they're up to. In a homeschooling situation, parents can do that if they feel that's what will benefit the student most, but they can also decide not to test their children, and that's completely fine. If you're in the homeschooling setting, you actually don't need to do end of school year exams. You can just do the SAT or the ACT and then just go straight into that. So that's what a lot of homeschoolers do, and they take out the stress and they take out the time that's needed to do that. So it's a great benefit of homeschooling. My husband has never been homeschooled, but he went to a grammar school, and one thing, he really enjoyed his education, but one thing he did say that was missing was the inculcation of life skills. They didn't give him many life skills. He came out, I guess, not being handy, and he said it would have been great if I'd learnt to screw things or nail things together, be a bit more savvy financially, that sort of thing. So I think homeschoolers often come out being extremely handy because they're always around the house, and their parents are always, pushing them to learn these things as the parents learn them as well. If you're in a homeschooling situation, you can also prepare for your future career much earlier. So if you show interest perhaps in cars, you can start perhaps buying cheap cars and putting them together or fixing them and then selling them on. One of my friends, he was a homeschooler. He used to buy little motorbikes, which he knew what was wrong with them, and it was a fairly easy fix, and he would just fix them up and then sell them on for 3 times the price. And he actually made a lot of money. He was doing this when he was about 14 years old. Another friend of mine, I've done an interview called something about how this homeschool entrepreneur made $1,000 a month selling snakes, but he actually used to have a business called Gollum's Gecko, and he would sell about $1,000 worth of reptiles. He'd breed them up and sell them on, and this fellow's interview is very interesting. I encourage you to look it up. But he has just so many ideas just popping out of his brain, which he can use to make money. So that is really fantastic, and I find that it's a trait that a lot of homeschoolers have because their parents have pushed them into these ventures instead of just pushing them into college or a trade or some other job. One of the problems I find with a lot of graduates of schools is that they're just so used to following the bell, following this, following that, that they don't have a lot of autonomy. In the homeschooling situation, many parents push their child to make decisions for themselves. And so when they are considering a job, they can think about that perhaps a little bit more clearly instead of getting to the end of their school years and going, oh, I've got to choose what am I going to do now for the rest of my life? homeschoolers are often a little bit more decisive with that, so that might be another benefit of homeschooling. Another benefit of homeschooling for some people is that if you're of a small ethnic minority, you might find homeschooling helpful, especially if your children are being bullied in school. A lot of African American families these days are homeschooling for that reason. They just find there's, I guess, less judgmentalism in the homeschooling situation, and they can teach their children a little bit more of their culture. If you or your partner are in a situation where your job requires you to move an awful lot, homeschooling is a really great way or alternative to, instead of every year moving them to a different school, homeschooling will let them have that continuity, that even if we are moving, it's okay because my school or my homeschool is staying the same. If you were considering sending your child to an extremely expensive grammar school, you could get the same education at home for a fraction of the price if you were to do it. So it could be a cheaper way of educating. Obviously, if you're sending your child to a public school, you probably can't get much cheaper than that, but if you want them to have a top-notch education, I'd say you could do that a lot cheaper at home yourself. Another great benefit of homeschooling that particularly parents notice is their ability to be really flexible with their schedule. So something my parents loved, because we went on holidays every 6 months, is that because they were homeschooled, they could go and have holidays in non-school holiday periods. This means that there wasn't a zillion kids running around and all the attractions were full. Instead, we could get much cheaper accommodation prices because we're going off-peak times. A great tenet of Charlotte Mason homeschooling, which is a homeschooling method, is that you teach your child, you actively seek to teach them character traits. Now, this is a great way to really hone in on perhaps their weaknesses and encourage them for their strengths. And so I think homeschooling is a really great opportunity to do that. And if you choose to do the Charlotte Mason homeschooling method, then she has a lot of great ways you can encourage them in their character and build good skills that they can use for their adult life. Thanks for listening today. I really hope that you enjoyed it and got something out of it, and learned some of the benefits of homeschooling. I think there's heaps of reasons to homeschool, and I was homeschooled myself. I loved it. It does very much depend on the parent and how much work they're willing to put in, but very selfishly, I once asked my mother, I said, "Oh, Mom, it seems like so much work to homeschool," and she actually said, number one, she said, it's so much fun. My dad often said the best years of his life were homeschooling us. He loved it. And she said, number two, and she had 3 children in 3 years, but she said that homeschooling was actually a lot easier than sending us to Christian school. So there you are, it's not actually that hard. So I hope you've really enjoyed listening today. If you've liked it, hit the subscribe button and like, and the little bell icon will let you know next time I put a video out. So thanks for listening. Bye.